young leader, I grew up in a Chinese church, so I am a second generation Chinese Australian. And as I went to a few different churches, I found that there were some, I guess, issues between how the second generation and the first generation relate as a leader, and also I guess as a key leader, and also sometimes being privy to what the pastoral staff have to go through. And so that's kind of what drove me to look into this. Thank you so much. Look into this a bit more. To understand not only the people that are the leaders in my church, the first generation, but as I looked into that a bit more, I realised that I hadn't actually looked into my own context and the culture that I bring into this. And so, through God has brought me through different churches to see things, and also a journey to study more. And so what I'm presenting today is, I guess, what I would consider a gospel framework for looking at second generation and the specific concerns, brokenness, and how Jesus can come to that. It will be a bit brief, but I hope this blesses you in your ministry. Alright, let's get the first slide up. Alright, so you guys should be familiar with this concept. So, in God's intention, I guess, is that, all different kinds of cultures, they're all valued and they're all loved, and Jesus died for all of them. In Revelation 5, we see that it says, Jesus, you're worthy to take the scroll and to open the seals, because you are slaughtered and you redeemed people for God by your blood from every tribe and language and people and nation. You made them into a kingdom and priests to our God, and they will reign on earth. So Jesus has redeemed everyone, regardless of their tribe, their language spoken, their people group, their country. And all these people can become part of his kingdom and priests together, who reign together without hierarchical distinctions. Okay? All cultures have inherent beauty and worth, as we're all created by God, and no one culture is more disturbing than another. So if we look to the next slide, we can see that, there's inherent worth and beauty in all cultures. In Chinese culture, very generous with food, celebrations, respect for elders, rich and beautiful history. And similarly in Australian culture, next slide, thanks. Values of mateship and laid back, being given a fair go, egalitarian, independence, clean and healthy lifestyle. It's not surprising that lots of people like to migrate here. Alright, so if all cultures have been, we're all made in the image of God, they have inherent beauty and worth. When we work with people of different cultures, it should be easy, right? But it's not, because we're not there yet. Okay, that's the picture of heaven that we're all aiming for. And so I think for a lot of us, I suppose even those of us who have looked into cultures a lot, we're very good at talking about cultural diversity and multiculturalism. But we also need to acknowledge how cultural diversity functions in a fallen world. If we consider that, then we can see how we can work together to reach the nations, our communities and the nations. So I've got this. You may have heard, if you're in the right circle, this term called Asian between cultures. So I guess it's a way of encapsulating like Asian Australians, Asian Americans, Asian Canadians, that kind of thing. And so I'm going to use that terminology today. So as Asians between cultures, we see that there are various pressures, right? I'm going to use examples that are specific to my Chinese context, but I recognise that not everyone is Chinese here. So I think hopefully the methodology will be universal enough that you can insert your cultural values into that. Alright, let's look at the next slide. Oh yes, so we're going to talk about Asian pressure. So here are some examples. Yes. If you... Alright, some of you should be familiar with this. They're all from a site called Subtle Asian Traits, which is like the gathering place of all the Asians between cultures in the world. Yeah, so here are some examples of Asian pressure. Okay, some of those things. Okay, next slide. So, let's have a think. If you're an Asian between culture, let's think about, there's a big family dinner, wedding celebration. Maybe your church, your ethnic church, is having a combined service. You're in a community meeting together. So in what ways do we receive overt or subtle pressure to conform to various expectations and values from our background, Asian backgrounds? So in the Chinese micro context, there's very high power distance, so respectful of elders, parents. There's a low individualism, so very collective. High context communication, so it's very, it's not just that comes out of your mouth, it's your body language, it's how you dress. Those things are important for communication, right? And a lot of this is derived from Confucianism. We need to, there are certain ways that we're expected to communicate and carry ourselves. Indirect communication, so you might need to smile even if you don't feel like it inside. There's this idea that we need to save face. So some of these are, they can be good things in and of themselves, right? So we're at number 1, being patient. So some of the overt pressure then is, this need to respect elders and address them properly, working collectively to make decisions, doing things together. There are acceptable professions and non-acceptable professions. There's expectations on your marriage partner, expectations on being able to speak your language, when you date, when you have grandchildren, for so on and so forth. Okay. So those are some of the more overt expectations. But I think more often than not, it's quite subtle, isn't it? They're like paper cuts. So paper cuts, these small comments here and there, for example, about our weight, our marital status, our lack of academic achievement. And so a word that people use is called microaggressions, right? So they're sort of very brief, everyday exchanges that send these kind of negative messages to people because of their inability to conform to the group. But the people making the comments, may otherwise be really well-intentioned and unaware of the impact of their words, right? So, things like, oh, you look like you've gotten a bit fatter or thinner. I've gotten both in the same year. Like, oh, how, do you have a boyfriend yet? Smile, make sure you say hello, uncle. What happened to the other whatever percent? Look at so-and-so's child. They're doing so well. So, again, the more exposure, or the more that if you're here, if you want to work with people in here and flourish in this space, the more pressure you're going to receive. If you're out here and you're a lay leader or something, it's not, the pressure is not as intense. But if you're like an English pastor or something, it gets a lot harder as you go there. Right? Alright, so how do Asians between cultures deal with this pressure? As there's this pressure to be more Asian, it's often like some of these good things, they become, in a fallen word, conditions, right, for belonging and acceptance in our families and communities. Right? So if you are trying to really belong and be accepted over there, it's really difficult to talk back, right? It's really difficult to criticize people because you might get, marginalized. You might get kicked out. You might, you're that strange one that doesn't, comes up with these ideas that the rest of the people, it's not natural. And so instead of speaking out, a lot of us might internalize it, that maybe there's something deficient or wrong with me. Instead of other people taking responsibility for all these messages that might be hurting us, we think, it's my own problem. I don't feel enough. I'm never going to be enough. I'm going to have value only if I conform to these expectations of me. And for some people, this can cause a lot of mental health issues, struggles. And you see in the US, a lot of second-gen Asian American females experience a very high rate of low mental health issues. And we know that if you don't meet these expectations, you'll feel this sense of failure, that I'm like a failed Asian. And so, this brokenness also affects the way we view God, right? So for some of us, how we feel towards our parents or people who are already over us can transfer over to God. He might seem very distant, authoritarian, busy. He's not safe with our honest feelings or emotions. Okay, we also might feel like, I need to be more for him, I'm not good enough. And so, what is the result when all this stuff is internalized? It affects our relationships back with this group and this group. And so, it starts to go wrong in the way we relate to other Asians. So for some of us, there's a really big distance when it comes to relating with our parents and extended families, and even with the first generation in our churches, right? This distance could be emotional, psychological, or even geographical, right? Some people's parents live overseas. And so we have broken relationships here, a broken relationship. And so the degree of how broken that is might lead some of these people to find refuge over here. Another way it can go on then, is broken relationships this way. So it affects, sometimes, you're so bought into this idea that being Asian is great, that we might start to look down on Anglo-Australians, right? So when I was growing up, I grew up in sort of, what do you call it? I don't know what the equivalent in Melbourne is, but in Sydney it's the West, okay, the Westies, or like in Brisbane it's the sort of Desert Logan, the Bogan area. And my parents would be like, we've got to show these Anglo people because you're just as good as them, Asians are smart, blah, blah, And so, then they'd be like, look at these people, like, where we are, like, you start to look down on Caucasian people, which, frankly, we're not seeing people as made in the image of God, right? It's frankly sinful. Okay, but I would associate, Chinese people must be smart. These Western people, at least in my community, they're not so smart. Okay? Which is not good. And so, I'd like to reiterate that there's nothing wrong with our families helping us retain our ethnic heritage, right? There's nothing wrong with that at all. But what we're interested in, though, is how these cultural values and expectations function in the fallen world, right? Something that's good becomes really hard to do well, to pass on well, because it starts to become a condition, right? A condition of belonging and acceptance. And while people have good intentions to pass on culture, it can be a confusing and hurtful process for some of us. Alright, next slide. We're going to move to Western pressure. So here's I could update this slide with all this coronavirus ones. Yes, so there's pressure also at the same time to be more Western. Let's do the next slide. Alright, be more Western. So, while we have expectations and values from Asians, first gen Asians in the West, East, there's also the same from Caucasians, from Australian society, whether it be your school teachers, your lecturer, your boss at your work, or just people at the shops and restaurants that you're at, right? There's people who are a minority in Australia. There can be overt or subtle pressure to be more Western, right, to fit into Australian society. You could be a minority at your school or your work. And so, what are some of those overt and subtle ways that we are asked to conform to these expectations and values? So in Australia, there's low power distance, so very egalitarian. I can be friends with my boss. I can have a beer with him. We can criticise our politicians. Nothing will happen to you. There's high individualism. So in a classroom, if you want to do well, it's about being assertive, being honest, being open, being confident. Completely opposite to the quiet listen to the teacher, don't ever question the teacher thing, in the opposite, the other Asian culture, Chinese culture. And low context communication, it's very much more word-based, so whatever I say out of my mouth is what I'm thinking. Alright, so, these are all generalizations, by the way. Within each culture, there's lots of diversity and difference, but I'm just using this comparatively speaking. Right, now a lot of these Western values can be traced back to the Enlightenment. Right, so there's overt pressure expectations to, look a certain way if you're going to be Australian, right? There's, the Ching Chong Chang playground taunts, the idea that Australian is a white person. They go back to where you came from, that kind of thing. And then how the media sometimes portrays people with an Asian background. Alien invasion, baby formula, property market, selective schools, coronavirus. That somehow, there's to be feared, right? But then there's also, it's more often subtle pressure, right? So rather than overtly telling people to be more Western, it's more like the way Asians are portrayed can be quite narrow or negative, making it really unappealing to want to identify as an Asian, keep your Asian heritage. So it could be invisibility in the media. So, when you look on screen, the Asians they don't play very cool characters. They're the sidekick, the geek, the asexual male, the exotic female. They're all stereotypes, right? Many times up until recently, Asians on screen, they don't have very complex narratives. They're not very interesting. All the role models like superheroes, they're not Asian. Right. So again, there's this idea of paper cuts, right? Microaggressions, which people, they don't mean, but it happens. Paper cuts don't really hurt, but the more you move into that space, the more paper cuts you will get, right? So it's almost like death by paper cuts. The more you go and trying to flourish in this environment. And our parents want us to flourish in this environment. A lot of us, they've migrated here, they've sacrificed so hard for us. But to do that, we have to endure some of these pressures. So some of the paper cuts, where are you from? Where are you really from? That the person maybe can't it's hard for people to fathom that their home environment is the same. Okay? Your English is really good. When I used to work corporate, we used to microwave our lunches in the microwave, and just this sense of the smell of your lunch is, not normal. Yeah, and there's things like also the bamboo ceiling where you're just not sure if you're being passed over for promotion because you're not a good cultural fit with the other senior executives, which are all one race as well. All right, so there's also pressure what you say is going to reflect badly on your community, right? So it's not something that someone in the majority culture needs to deal with. So if I sneeze on the train, people are going to think something about Asians, but you don't. But as even a second generation European migrant, you don't have to deal with that. You just represent yourself, okay? But we somehow have to represent all Asians. So if I'm a bad driver, it takes a lot of Asians to come. Alright, so the more we connect, the more pressure we feel. For me, I didn't really feel much of this. When I was sort of out here, sort of on the margin, but as soon as I wanted to move up here or move up there, when I changed seasons, so I went to Bible college, for example, that was actually quite a Caucasian place, even though my church is quite an Asian place. So depending on where you are in life, you might feel the pressures differently. Alright, so again, being pressured to be more Western is often a condition of our belonging and acceptance, right? In our schools, workplace, community. Our success is dependent on how well we conform. So when that happens, it's really difficult to criticize, right? To talk back. Because you might go, oh, that's so un-Australian. Or you might be kicked out. You just go back to where you came from, don't like it. So this idea is I need to be this grateful migrant forever. And so again, it's hard to speak out, so we internalize it. There's something wrong with me then. My Asianness is embarrassing, it's inconvenient, I'm going to try and suppress it as much as possible. We might start to believe that we only have value if we conform to these expectations. We might feel, oh, I'm a second best Australian, or at best an honorary Australian, I'm not a real one. And we might feel like we are a perpetual foreigner. So, I might be here for 5 generations, but because of how I look, I'm never going to be the same as a fifth generation, Italian migrant, for example. And again, this affects the way that we view God. He might seem really uninterested in our ethnicity. It can seem really irrelevant to what he wants me to do. We might start to find value in, again, achieving for God. I need to be more, I need to be enough, right? And again, that affects the way that we relate to our communities. It comes back. So in the first way, it goes wrong in the way we relate to Caucasians. Because I'm buying into this idea that being more Western is good and is normal, I might start elevating Western ideals, right? Western education, Western beauty ideals, okay? Because if I am more like that, then I might be accepted. Western pop culture. But for some who might have experienced something very intense, like a racially charged attack, they might go and find refuge back in the Asian community. Secondly, it can go wrong in the way that we relate to our Asian community. So we might feel embarrassment, we might reject our Asian identity, we might make fun of those who are more Asian than us, right? Because we're trying so hard to belong here. If I associate with this, new international student, it's going to drag me down. It's going to threaten my belonging and acceptance. So what a lot of us do is we start distancing ourselves, right? But it's like when a Chinese person commits a cultural faux pas, it's embarrassing and weird. But if someone who's Anglo does, it's cute. At least they're trying. Okay? So there's a double standard there. We associate Chinese people with accents in English as being unintelligent, right? But it's not the case the other way around. So, so again, I'd like to reiterate there is nothing wrong, right, with adjusting to the culture of our host countries, right? It's a good thing. Again, we're interested in how these cultural expectations and values function in a fallen world because we are fallen, right? It's really impossible to do this perfectly, right? Because they'll become conditions, right? Let's go to the next slide. But some of you might be, so this is just an example of, you start to hate yourself and your Asianness, right? So some people experience very intensely. Okay. Right. Oh, and this is, if you haven't seen this video, it's just about lip silence. Alright. So yes, Asian between cultures are often stuck in the middle, right? I'm not enough of this, I'm not enough of that. I'm stuck in between. Okay, next slide. Now some of you might actually feel that, well, I don't actually feel broken. I don't feel that stress of being stuck in between. And I think what some of the people, yourself or the people that you minister to, might be doing is maybe they've found a refuge, right? Maybe you grew up in an Asian area, your school is, mostly Asian people, and you're here, right? And I think you're basically, in a sense, almost pushed there because you've got being more Western, being more Asian. So when I find this place, it's a nice refuge. It's a place where I don't have to be more anything, I'm just me, right? And and I think online communities is kind of where I sometimes do that. It's little Asian traits. Some other, where people understand you. But at the same time, because that can be a bit unhelpful because we then start to this desire for safety, for refuge, can become inward-looking, right? It can become its own idol, where that we don't want to interact with these people. It's too hard. I'm going to stay in my bubble. And it also means that we're not very good at looking after other marginalised people, right? So there are other Asians who maybe didn't come from a skilled migrant background, who might need our help, or Indigenous people. So we find that because we start to prioritise our own safety, we might start neglecting other people. Right. Another way that you might deal with this and not feel any stress at all is you've done this thing called double self. So when I'm with Westerners, I'll be as Western as possible. When I'm with Asians, I'll be as Asian as possible. Right? So you switch between your Clark Kent, your Superman, but they don't ever appear in the same room together. Yeah. Christian church, again, can you bring them there? Who's going to turn up? Your workplace Anglo self or your Asian self? So again, like this split is a very unhelpful thing. We all need Jesus at the end of the day. So there's this ethnic brokenness I've been talking about, and it can manifest in different ways depending on your upbringing and what your family was like, what your schooling was like. So yeah, this sense of, I'm not enough, but we know that with Jesus, right, there is no conditions on acceptance in his kingdom. Right? We don't have to be enough, right? It's not about merit, it's about grace. Okay. This shame that we feel about identity, that I don't want to show who I am, this other side of me, Jesus takes on shame. He's always present with us when I feel like I can't be open with him about my emotions with my parents. God is okay with our emotions. We can be honest with him, we can be angry with him. Okay, we're not going to get kicked out because of that. He's loving, and we are accepted and enough because of Christ, right? He helps us also to see the inherent worth and the goodness of being an Asian twin culture. At the same time, Jesus also helps us to confront our sin, right? That sometimes we might need to repent of superiority, that sometimes we elevate some cultures or aspects of some cultures, sometimes we put others down. But actually to see them as God's valued and redeemed creation. Right? He also removes this impulse to pass on the hurt. So I guess what I've been talking about is if you're a broken person, hurt people will hurt people. If you don't have anyone to come and heal and deal with that pain, you're going to pass it on, whether it's back to the Asian community or back to the Western community. Right? So as Jesus comes to work in us and go, you are enough and you are valued, you don't need to buy into these meme or messages. Okay? You don't need security, acceptance, or financial. You don't, I'm enough for you. Then we don't need to get bought into these messages. Right? We won't pass on the pain. And then we'll also find that strength to love people who might continue to be passing on these messages to us, because they don't go away, right? You go back to your family, you go back to your workplace, whatever, the messages keep coming, right? They're going to keep coming. But it's only that through Jesus and his empowering that we can have that grace to respond with forgiveness, but also, I'll talk about in the next slide, but not sort of also be a victim as well. I think because we're not trying to get belonging and acceptance, then we have that courage to say, actually, this is not okay, that there's this racism going on, or these people just actually hurt me. That we can have the strength to go, I'm actually valued and I don't think this is okay. We can resist. Okay, so next slide. Ephesians 2:19 to 20. I really like this verse because it says, consequently, you are no longer foreigners and strangers. Right? So in Australia, you might sometimes feel like a perpetual foreigner. Within your family, you might feel like a stranger because you just don't fit the culture. But in God's kingdom, we are fellow citizens, right? We are in the same, nation, right? God's people, and also members of his household. We are part of his family, nation and family, right? Built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets with Christ Jesus himself as the cornerstone. Next slide. Alright, so then we can, as we've looked at brokenness, and while I think a lot of us have good reason to be angry at groups which may have caused us pain, we're also accountable to God for how we respond to that pain while we are fallen, right? And it goes to show that we're really slaves to sin. Right? We really need Jesus to save us, to heal us, and to transform us for his purposes. And so as we take this log out of our eyes, some of the ways that we've dealt with pain, we can see more clearly to take out the speck from other cultures' eyes. Right? Whether it be racism, kind of authoritarianism. And so as we are healed, we can respond with grace and sacrifice, even in the midst of these messages. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, yeah, so go back. One more thing. So, as we kind of being healed now, then we can be in a healthy place as leaders for God to use us as agents between cultures. So I think sometimes we're tempted to think that Christians are all generic, right? We serve God in a generic way, but and once you're in Christ, that's enough. But I would like us to think about being in Christ as Asian person. It's an embodied way of talking about it, where it's not just this spiritual thing, right? God has made you in a certain way, and as we're healed, we can be used in specific ways to help our communities. Right? So not as I said, not as a failed Asian, not as an honorary Anglo person, but we are secure, right, in Christ as an Asian between culture. And so we can move towards reconciliation in our churches, right, between first and second generation. We can also speak up and advocate for people when the BMOR messages are really hurtful to us or our communities or other marginalised people. And we can also more effectively bridge cultures without unconsciously elevating or putting down others between each of us. Right, so there are no generic Christians, right? As we contextualise to the second generation, we can address the specific brokenness that I've talked about and how Jesus comes specifically to heal that brokenness and also confront sin. And so Asians between cultures can use this brokenness, these healed wounds, right, to bless, right, to reconcile, to advocate, and to bridge. All right. Hope that's really helpful for you guys, and please remember to write your questions down. Yeah. There's a handout that's coming around now. This is just a summary. You have everything. So if you're familiar with Gospel Allies, there's creation kind of thing at the top. There's the fall, which is over here. And there's Jesus, and there's as we move towards heaven. So have a think about where were you at when you started today, I guess, and maybe where is it that your people that you serve might need to be? For some of us, maybe we started up here and we sort of saw we should just leave it as it is, because that's what it looks like, right? That's what church and looks like. We just leave it as it is. For some of us, or people that we serve, we're over here. We feel the effects of sin. We feel the effects of brokenness, whether it's our families, whether it's our community, Anglo-Australian society, or maybe we don't feel it, but that's because we've found interesting ways to deal with that pain. Maybe some of us, we have, Jesus is our Saviour and Lord, but we're not really sure what that means for who we are as Asians between cultures. For some of us, we've been trying to do this healing, bridging, advocacy work, but maybe we need the strength more so that Jesus provides somehow. Alright, so we're moving to groups now. Yeah, okay. So have a go. I've got some discussion questions. They're intense, so see how you go. History is, and that's where it started, right? I think as Steve has said, that's where we start, but we're heading towards something better. We're heading towards heaven in different ways. So I think Asian between culture churches can be really helpful, particularly in places where there's no in-between refuge, right? There's just nowhere for these people to go to sort of feel a sense of belonging, feel a sense of pride in who they are, and also for people who don't know, I guess, haven't really found that voice, all right? Because you've heard other voices all the time, and you don't know that actually our voices are valuable as well. And so it's sort of a place to help cultivate that. And to find a bit of relief. I mean, at the same time, of course, as I was mentioning in the presentation, we want these places to eventually go back out, right? Be outward looking, to go back into different places to serve. Whether it's for that in your Chinese Vietnamese church, which can be really hard going, right? Or back in your predominantly Anglo place of work. I think, or like to advocate for. Now that you know what it's like to be marginalised, then you know for other marginalised people, right, say Indigenous people, say other groups, you know what it's like. Then we can use, I think in Australia we're simultaneously privileged. Like a lot of us have wealth and we have built some really good inroads into Australia, At the same time, because of this, we can feel marginalised, but we can use what God has given us, the privilege, to serve those who are marginalised, rather than sort of keeping it to ourselves. So that's what I really like about what Rice is doing, and being able to unite second generation Asians between cultures around the world, and do that in a way that's around Jesus. Having said that, yeah, multicultural churches are great too. I guess with multicultural churches, what I suppose would be looking for a good multicultural church is a multicultural church that's not, I suppose, token in a sense. Because you can have different people of many cultures together, but can they actually make a valuable contribution? Are they all there to conform to whoever the leaders are, which is basically Western? Even in both churches, if you close your eyes, does it sound exactly like a Western preacher or Western theology? You know, is there any cultural distinctive to it? You know, if there isn't, then I would sort of, you know, I think multicultural churches also have their things that they need to work with. So for them, it's sort of giving like good representation to different groups, right? Not just sort of a tokenistic thing, and that's really, really hard to do, right? But it would be like, I think the idea, right? One idea. Does everyone see Parasite? You know, like that film, right? It's all in Korean. It's a very Korean film. All these Korean references, but yet it managed to find success and flourishing in an Anglo context without having to change itself. You know, that's pretty amazing, right? That they can find acceptance and belonging in sort of the Academy Award circuit without having to change anything. You know, I think that would be lovely. But of course, like in reality, we need to work hard at accepting each other. Another question is, there's one about dealing with pain and trauma and how we can practically do that. That's tricky. I mean, part of it is, I wish there were lots of more culturally and racially informed therapists out there. Because I think a lot of the therapy around can be still quite Western. Like it assumes that openness is good and authenticity and like yourself, right? Which may not be the case if you're from an Asian background. So, I mean, ideally, someone who's sort of aware of all those things can help you work through it. But I guess at least understanding some of the theology behind it will help, I think. But yeah, a lot of these issues, particularly with our families, they can be really deep, right? They require years and years of work and healing from professionals and particularly as Christian leaders to walk alongside people on that journey. Okay, maybe we have time for one more question. What do you think is God's plan for Asian intimacy between cultures for God's mission in the Australian context? Also, what will be our unique voice to the Caucasian Christian leaders and pastors? So I guess going back to the last slide, which is about ministers of reconciliation, advocacy, and bridging, right? So I think for us, like, because we know what it's like, first of all, it's about us going back to our churches or whatever and working towards reconciliation, working towards understanding. And it's not just about I understand your culture, you understand mine, because I found that just cultural intelligence is not enough, right? Because you still hurt each other. You understand why you hurt each other, I've been there, but what can you do? It's a stalemate, right? They said that because they're Asian, but what does that do? So I think the next step then is, how does sin come into this picture? Why are they saying that? Why am I like this? Because once we understand sin and take the log from our eyes, and then we can move forward, right? We can bring Jesus to help us in. So we've got to, I think, see sin. And then we can also find grace for ourselves, because we know that we contributed to this as well, even if it's a little bit. And then we can show grace to other people. And so I think that's quite an amazing thing, because I think at the moment in our churches, like the way that we relate to each other between first and second is basically the same as in a non-Christian setting. Okay, so if we can have families and people that love combined meetings and love combined service and love hanging out with our parents' generation, that would be quite a counterculture. But of course that's going to take a lot of work. But I think I'm actually moving on to this now where I actually enjoy that. I actually enjoy being with people from first generation and doing things together. But it's taken a lot of work in my part to get there. The second thing is advocacy, right, and speaking up. So part of it is speaking up for ourselves, our voice, and finding that. And go, actually, these other voices seem really important that I need to listen to, but my voice is, I can contribute too. And speaking up for other marginalised people, as I said, you know what it feels like. Okay? There are other groups that are less privileged than us that would really benefit from us speaking out. And that might mean, speaking up when you see racism, speaking up when you see really unhelpful authoritarian, and sort of being confident in that, because you know that people are precious to God. But if you're healed, you won't do that out of anger, right? You won't be driven primarily by anger. Right? Although I think if you go on this journey, you have to work through anger. Okay, because you're going to start realizing all my life people have been telling me these things and I've bought into it, right? And you're going to start to feel really angry at racism and, why do I have to, be marginalized, right? But once you can work through the anger, then you can come with grace, right? To be able to confront some of those really unhelpful being messages. Okay. All right, and then bridge. So, being able to bridge cultures, right? Particularly in global Christianity now, there's the global north, which is really Western, the global south, which is African and Asian, right? And they're quite different. And so a lot of Caucasian pastors and leaders are really trying to understand this, like the rise of Asia. And how can I, be more inclusive? How can I, how can I work with the Asian people? Because it's coming up more and more. And so we can do that. Well, we can have this special role as this bicultural ambassador, but we can only do that well if we're not elevating one culture subconsciously and putting down another. We can see clearly, once you've taken everything out of your eyes, there's strengths in this culture and also weaknesses in both. And I've been, in the last months or so, I've noticed more and more Caucasian leaders want help with this. They genuinely want help. And so, again, you work through your anger. You work through, because you're being asked to step into the orange circle. And once you go in there, the microaggressions,